Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we are doing another episode 18 of Corporate Cardboard. I'm here joined with my co-host Dan. Dan, how are you this fine morning?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you, Mackenzie. Yeah, glad to be back. It's been a bit longer than usual, but I'm going to approach that by being very positive about my recent plays.
Hey, this is super exciting. I love it when you find good games because that means they are quality. So without further ado, let's get started with Corporate Cardboard. So Dan, first off, tell me the first thing that you've been playing in our first section, what we've been playing.
Okay, I'm going to start off with a game that people might be a bit tired of by now. At least in UK, people are talking about this game non-stop, but I don't care. I want to talk about it anyway. This is a game called Ark Nova. So this is a pretty heavy involved Euro strategy game about building a zoo from scratch, basically. So you're building the cages, you're getting animals in from all over the world. And this is a game with a lot of shared DNA with titles such as Terraforming Mars or Underwater Cities, that kind of thing, where you're synergizing cards together to get victory points in lots of different ways. But this one, I think the theme shines through wonderfully, which is quite a rare thing for me to say because I don't normally focus on theme, but this is the kind of game where, despite how heavy it is, you could easily come back to this game in 6 months, even 12 months without playing it again and remember how everything works because it is so logical. And that was kind of one of my main sticking points for the game, was just everything just flows very intuitively. And mechanically, what I really like about this game is the core system. So basically, you have 5 different actions you can take corresponding to either building cages, getting animals, kind of doing this kind of investment board thing. But in their own right, they're all very simple. So all you need to do is know is what those 5 actions do, and that you pretty much know the whole game. And this works in a really cool system where the longer you neglect something, the higher it will slide up the scale. And the longer you leave it, you get a more powerful action when you do choose to take that action, and it go right to the back of the queue and be a weaker version again. And that's what this game is, mostly consists of. And after that, as I said, you're trying to get these animals in front of you, make sure you have the appropriate cages to put them in, or the correct environment. And maybe they might want to go next to water, maybe they might want to go on the next to mountains on your player board, depending on the animal type that they are. And you're just getting a bunch of victory points in different ways, unlocking bigger engines as you go on, and just trying to, I don't know if you're familiar with a game called Rajas of the Ganges, where you're trying to get these 2 polarizing scoring mechanisms to cross over, and when they cross over, that is what's going to trigger the end of the game. But this one was an absolute blast. I played this one probably way in the midst of its hype. It's blown up massively. When that happens, that kind of lays a foundation to being not as good as you might think because the hype is so strong. But I adored it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm really enjoying it still. So I think it's a wonderful game that I'll enjoy for quite some time to come.
I'm so happy to hear this. We just got this into our library, and this is such positive news. So excited. This blends a lot of the things that I love from some of my favorite games, but the theme is so wonderful. When we were opening the box, just looking at the cards and watching the things and looking at the tags and being like, whoa, this is so clean. This looks so exciting. And I'm going through the rules videos. I'm like, oh my gosh, this system sounds so solid. I'm so excited. What's the thing that is I guess what's the thing that's the most fun to you in this game? What do you think?
I suppose just the opportunities that you just always discovering new combos, new things. Oh, that works cool. That works for that. That works for this. Oh, I didn't realize that. And there's so many different paths you can go down. Maybe you might want like a zoo based on all African animals, or maybe you want all like primates or something. And there's all these different ways you can go down, and they all kind of synergize with these public objectives that you're trying to go for, called these conservation projects, which you're showing here. So some might say you want to try and look after these predators, and then again you get points based on having predators in your zoo. Or some of them might even say you can ship them off back into the wild, and then you kind of get points that way, but you lose that attraction to your zoo, so you're losing points but gaining more valuable points. And it's like constant back and forth and juggling those 2 scoring things that I really enjoy. I will say this: the one slight nitpick I have with it is that you do only start at the base level with only having 3 cards in your hand, which, considering this deck is absolutely huge, sometimes the synergies aren't quite there. But You can actually choose to have way more than 3, but as soon as it gets to this certain point in the game where a break is taken, then you have to discard back down to your hand limit, and
Mm,
sometimes that can catch you off guard, and you might have to discard cards that you don't really want to. But there is potential to increase your hand size to 5, which feels a bit better for me. But the rest of it is absolutely sublime, I think.
gotcha, gotcha. It just I guess it prevents you from just hoarding things and actually forces you to play stuff, which is pretty good. I like when games kind of pressure you on pacing. So that's I like that.
Yeah, but yeah, I surprisingly I didn't really hear much noise from you about this one, Mackenzie, because I know you generally on the ball with new titles. I never really heard I never really heard you express your thoughts on it. And as you said, you just told me that you've just got it into your collection. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy it, because I really did. I thought it was great.
Yeah, we're part of the pre-order. We're on the pre-orders with Capstone here, so we're just getting it whenever our standard retailers will deliver things in the United States. So excited to give it a try, but man, it looks so good, and just the presence that it gives you is just when you open that box, it's like, wow, this is bright, inviting. I can't wait. This is going to be
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
so fun as well. So fun for a heavy game.
So exciting! This is so exciting. Oh, so glad to hear. All right. So this brings us to a game that's completely opposite of what we're talking about here, where it is a campaign driven boss battling game set on a train. This is Vagrant Song. So Vagrant Song here is a game that came out of nowhere at Gen Con and really surprised a lot of people, and myself included. I thought this was such a weird step for weird miniatures to take, where this is a company who's known for their miniatures, but they've created this new board game that is uber thematic, but that includes no miniatures. It uses these plastic standees, but the game itself is incredible. So Vagrant Song has you playing as vagrants, and you're going to be doing your best to give humanity to haints, which are these evil spirits, these ghosts, and you're going to be using your attacks and your abilities to move around the board, manipulate the different terrains and the items, and then give humanity to the haints. By doing so, you are kind of damaging them. But the humanity in this game is really interesting because whenever you deal damage to something, you are giving it humanity, which is a good thing. So you can also give humanity to your fellow characters to basically heal yourself, which is really interesting. So every time you deal damage, it has the potential of being multi-use because you can also use it as healing effects. This makes all of your attacking items very flexible because now all of a sudden you have ways that you can bring people up to thresholds that might make them safe, but you also have ways to deal little bits of chip damage or large hits. So you have some really cool choices when it comes to how you're dishing out and how you're protecting your fellow vagrants. I really think this is really fascinating, just that standard action, and I think it's really well done here. But the game itself is based on this coin action system. So these are the Vagrant skill cards, and every round you're going to have 3 of these coins that you get to use and place on your actions. Now, based on where you put the coins, that determines the strength of those actions. So you have a lot of flexibility in your choice, saying, okay, I'm going to use this character's move ability here. Maybe I'll put 2 coins on it so I can move twice, and then I'll use one of my skill cards and use this 1 coin here. And your skill might say, hey, roll 2 dice, and it does 1 damage per coin on it, or some other effect to that level. So I really like the way that you have a lot of flexibility with those coins and how you're able to decide from that point and tactically move around this board. And it really matters where you position yourself because you have this list of actions that the boss can do based on like this character profile, but you have 1 token that's going to be pulled from this bag that actually determines what those actions are. So I love that you have some planning that you can put forward into based on the probability of which chips might be pulled, but there's always that unpredictability of what's actually going to happen. So your decisions really matter because you kind of know what's going to happen here and you can prepare for it. And I really appreciate that in these boss battling style games, but the flow of the game is so simple and straightforward that it's easy to get played and get going. The setup takes less than 5 minutes. The gameplay is intuitive and fun. This is one that you can get up and going really quickly. And then the board itself is really dynamic with the different terrain and the scenario effects. And it has this really interesting system of the event tokens where when you're playing, Every time you pull something from the bag, whether it be you who's pulling out these items like this candle here, you can use those items on future turns to do something. You may accidentally find a numbered token, and that will take you into this event page on the back, which is going to trigger something that's thematic and has to do with what you're doing. And I love this. I think this is so well done because it might do something really helpful, it might do something terribly, it might be something you just don't see as you play. So it's really neat because it comes at a surprise, and sometimes that can be just the little help you need, or it might just push you into a dangerous situation. I really, really appreciate this. I think it's so clever because every single component in this game has a use. So the coins are double sided. One side is used for the actions, the other is used for like this event phase during your camp phase. The bag for the action tokens is items for the vagrants, but also it's how the haints are going to be moving around and dealing damage. It is such a well done package. Nothing is wasted. Everything is trim. It's so streamlined, so thematic. This is one of my favorite boss battle experiences. This came out at the same time as Townfolk Tussle, and I have to recommend this one way more than that one. I think this one is so clean and it's so satisfying to play. So Vagrant Song, I'm very, very impressed with this one. Have you heard about this one? Any interest in trying this?
I've heard a lot about this one. I mean, I know the guys at the Dice Tower all rave about it. They think it's fantastic. Visually, I think it looks brilliant. I love this artwork style, and I really like that concept of the coin placement. That sounds a really cool mechanism. So, is this? You say it's a boss battler. Is it literally you as a team start straight up with a boss, or do you have to build towards the boss?
So you just straight up, you've got a boss, and each
Okay.
boss comes with its own specific scenario, win conditions, and there's this other really cool system. It's a objective system. There's 3 face up, and these are additional things for you to do during this fight. So it's not just about taking out that boss. You can also do these mini objectives as well. And some of the bosses you can't even kill, so you have to do the objectives, which has
Right.
you interacting with the game system in a really unique way. Oh, it's so good. I don't want to give any spoilers, but every single boss is fascinating, interesting, and uses some mechanism of the game that you know of, but it lets you explore it a little bit further. And I think it's so cool. This is such a good game.
Yeah. How many bosses come in the game?
I'm about a third of the way with this game. A third of the way done, and I've played 9 scenarios, I think.
Oh wow.
So I'm not sure exactly how many. I don't know if you'll repeat bosses, or maybe you'll see the same character again, but they play differently. You have this big scenario book, and each scenario book has a page that determines how the bosses interact. And even in the bosses, there's 2 ways that they interact. There's like a happy and an unhappy mask, and whenever it's on that particular side, that's the attack profile they're using. So it's kind of like the mood of the boss, which is really cool. So I think there's a lot of variability in here, and there's even bonus scenarios if you go through the Weird Miniatures website. So there's a lot to love here, a lot to play, and it's going to be one that you can pick up and play easily. Setup is a breeze, and it's such a fresh theme. It's really good. I really like this game.
It sounds good. And I think it's going to be a bit of a it sounds like it's already been a hit, but I think it's going to be a long-term kind of sleeper hit as well. So
I hope so. I think it definitely deserves the love. All right,
brilliant.
Dan, what do you got for me next?
So staying on the from my previous game, pretty involved Euro style game. This is a game actually Mackenzie talked about a few episodes ago called Boonlake that I managed to finally get a copy of Boonlake, get it played. This is the latest Alexander Pfister design, one of his bigger, more sprawling games along the lines of Maracaibo, Great Western Trail, that kind of weight. Maybe I put it somewhat comparable to Great Western Trail in its complexity. Would you agree with that, Mackenzie?
I would say yes. I think that's a very fair
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah, I thought so. For me, I thought this was almost like Alexander Pfister's take on a game like Terra Mystica, where you are putting stuff onto the board, and as you put more stuff onto the board, you are unlocking income on your personal player board. Getting more money each round, getting more points each round. But what I really like about this game is that no matter what you do, you're almost kind of like luring other people into doing other things. So, like if you put houses down, you're really incentivized to do so because you're going to create more income. But then you're creating opportunities for other players to put their cows down, which will give them money if they put their cows down, and they get money for each cows you put down. And then you might be incentivized to put your cows there and build settlements around it because everything works differently. They score points different ways. Everything creates income, and you're incentivized to build up these little settlements because the more buildings there, the more settlements you can build means more points. What I really like about this game as well is the kind of player dictated pacing of it, which is a lot like again a lot like Western Trail, a lot like Maracaibo, but in this one you've got the lake that goes through the whole map, and depending on which action you take, which are based on these action strips, which you get to take the actions that you take, maybe placing tiles on the board, maybe upgrading your units on the board to the next level, you know, how people to houses, houses to settlements, playing cards. But the higher you take them up on this action strip, the more spaces you have the option to move down on the lake and potentially get the bonus that you want. You know, more flexibility to take what you want, but then the action you take goes right to the bottom of the row again, meaning that if the next person takes that action, they're going to suffer negative points. So much like Ark Nova, you are incentivized to let things build up to reuse the action and not just keep spamming the same action. I really like this on the player boards as well. This lever system where you have these different bonuses, and whenever you want, you can kind of invest in buying these, but whenever you want, you can trigger them, which will give you a nice little kick and a nice little boon to use. And something that I think is underrated about this game that not many people I've heard comment about it who talk about this game is the actual resource system. You don't actually have physical resources in this game. You just have this track, and depending on where your two boats are on this track, is the resources available to you at that time. A nice little twist there that I thought was quite a cool little puzzle where you can move down the lake as much as you want, but if you move back up, then it's going to cost you money. So you need to use that accordingly to make sure you're not wasting money to keep refreshing your resources and play cards in a certain order. But a lot going on in this game. You're probably not going to get a grasp of it from me describing it, but I think it's a really good Fister game. And I think out of all the Fister games I've played, this one is quite strongly in my second place. You know, Maracaibo is my favorite. I don't know if it will ever be overtaken, but this one was a really strong game. I enjoyed everything about it, really. Not really much I can complain about, really. I think the art style is not the best, but that's nitpicking. The gameplay for me is rock solid, and I enjoyed it a lot.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me with just the fact that every action here is just bonuses and income galore. You're constantly building, you're constantly progressing your game state and building out on the board, and you have so much choice when you do so. Every action is available to you, so you can really play things to cater to wherever you are at that point in the game. And I think that's really well done. And funny that you mentioned the resource system as being like a positive for you. This was actually my biggest negative in the whole game.
Okay.
At the rate that I was drawing cards as I play, and it's still this way. I played this actually this last weekend. The rate at which you're drawing cards in this game, I felt that I never had to worry about the resource cost because they were always there, right? I didn't really have an issue. So I could cater my hand to the resources that I already had, as opposed to changing my resources to play the cards in my hand. It felt to me something like Maracaibo, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm drawing like a million cards. I should not get attached to these. I'm going to use them to get more pioneers later in this other action. And as I said, the rate at which you're drawing, that doesn't mean that you should really worry about, ooh, I really need to play this card because it's so good. No, you're going to draw another one. It's fine. Like you're going to draw a card that has a very similar effect, or that has a similar amount of value. So that's kind of where I was at with this game. So the resource building is something I just kind of ignore, honestly, at some points. I think the last game I played, I paid $2 once the entire game. And my friend bought this lever that said you could move your boats back for free. Yeah. And he just got a point for it every single round because he just never used it. And I was like, oh, it's a trap. No, don't buy the lever.
No, I get what you're saying, but I think I like when people try something different.
Yeah.
And this one, normally you're always, hoarding resources. This one, it's kind of a different style of management, but I understand what you're saying. It is quite forgiving, especially when you get those +2 tokens on there. But I still like the concept of it, and maybe you've played it a few more times than I have, and I've not really been deflated by it yet. I suppose I still quite like it.
Gotcha. I will say that the resource buildings are very important when going for these large goals, because they require at least 2, sometimes even 4 or 3 of a resource, and you have to have the buildings for that. So I really like that you can pick them up through different bonus actions, and that's what you're using them for. So they definitely have their uses here too. So it's not like a complete negative, but definitely the weakest point in the game for me. But I love this game. This game's really good. It's in my top 100. I think this game is great.
Oh yeah, it'll no doubt be in my top 100.
Yeah,
quite
high,
a great game, probably. I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm so happy to hear 2 bangers, and both of these are in the US by Capstone too. So they're having a wonderful time here. I think that's super awesome for them. So excellent. That is Boonlake. Thank you so much for sharing, Dan. All right, this next game that I want to talk about is a sequel to a game that I was not very hot on, but they came out with a game that I think is absolutely amazing, and that is Now or Never. So Now or Never is the sequel to Near and Far, and I honestly really cooled on this company, the Red Raven Games, but then I played Sleeping Gods by them, and I just thought, whoa, this game is amazing. So Sleeping Gods kind of pulled me back in, like, okay, the the game development, the story, everything is progressing at a rate that I think is amazing. So let's try this out. Um, but I was pretty impressed with Now or Never. Now or Never takes the system of you've got a person that's moving on a map, you're interacting and doing events, and then you also have Euro game stuff that's happening and engine building in front of you. And so at face value, this sounds like a very weird combination of two things. And honestly, it is. It's a very weird combination of two things, but in this game, I think it works. And the biggest thing that does it for me is that you start this game being able to explore and being able to interact with the world. And I think that is huge. There's a lot of these games where you're going to have to build up your crew, build up your party, build up to do specific things to actually get your character out and start exploring. Not in this game. In this game, you can go out and do something. Your board starts with pre-printed weapons that you can use to attack different creatures. You start with quest cards in your hand, so you're able to move around and you're planning. You've drafted your initial quest cards, so you can make a plan from the very beginning of the game to actually advance and go around the map. And then you can have up to 3 interactions every single round. So you're encouraged to actually run around and do stuff on the board, which is really awesome because it's going to propel the rest of your engine forward. There's great tension in the different things that are available on the map. So there's always a reason to go somewhere. And it's a lot of pressure as to, hey, do I do this exploration or do I do the engine building in the form of these different character abilities or these buildings that you're going to be creating? So I really like the system here. As I said before, you have this gigantic map that you get to explore with your character, and the biggest criticism this game gets is it's a table hog. And for me, I don't really care about that. I think that table hog is I think it's like a nothing critique for me. It's like, oh no, I have more content for a game. Oh no, the art is huge. Oh no, like I don't care. So whenever I hear that, it's like, okay, give me an actual reason you dislike the game. But it has you playing in 4 areas. You have this main map that you move your character. You have your character board, which is going to hold all of your resources, your abilities, your items, and then have special abilities that you can use, as well as assistants, which give you small actions that you can use. But you can also use your opponent's assistance. So if they have something that you really want to do, you have to pay them cash, which is pretty important resource because that brings us into the next and final section, which is your building section. The whole premise of this game is you're an adventurer trying to bring back these refugees into your ancient city and build it back up from the ground up. So you have this large board in front of you and this large selection of tiles on the right. And so you're going to be building them one at a time, filling up this main board. And then based on what you build, it's going to give you end game point scoring, passive income, and at the end of every round, those buildings are going to generate you that income, and that's going to propel you forward. So it's all about placing these appropriately, building from the outside in. Once you build one building, you can only build something next to it. So you have a cool choice there as to what path am I going to take based on these quest cards I have, the character I'm using, and the buildings that are available for me in the future, and then seeing how that engine plays out. There's a lot to love here. And as I said before, the biggest thing here that really makes it rise above the pack is the fact that right from the get go, you get to explore. You don't have to do that build up. You get to have fun from turn one. And I really, really like that. It has a campaign as well that I think is just okay. The campaign offers you a little story thing that you can read. Some of those results that you get from those story events for different characters are really swingy and really, really powerful. And you're just like, oh my gosh, that's nuts. And you might just not experience that based on the way that these events go. Because normally when you get an event, you take it off the board and no one else can take that event. So it makes it even more important to go out and explore and do these events, which also takes off some of the pressure from the other important aspects of the game. So I'm not the biggest fan of the campaign, but I think that the core system itself is extremely solid. So that's Now or Never. I think it's a really well done game, and it's so much fun. It is a little long. I don't recommend it with high player counts, but I'm having a good time with it in the 2-player and solo mode. So great game.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't aware that this was playable in any other format than a campaign game. I thought it was strictly a campaign game. But not tried any of these Ryan Lockett games. But the level of ambition is just mind blowing to me. I love just these throwing everything in there. You can do anything you want, and that seems to be the kind of theme of this game. This concept of exploration. But yeah, I'd love to try them. I'm probably not something I'm going to acquire myself, but I'd love to just have a sit down session with someone who knows the game well and give it a go and see what these games are all about. But yeah, I've just not had that opportunity yet. But looks gorgeous. I say the gameplay's strong, so I'd be up for trying it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely thematic. And this is one that has a rule book that you can really just jump into. I had no issues learning this one, and everything was really logical in the way it worked. Iconography was clean, and it's just a very solid experience. If you like this world, if you enjoy this system, and you like the idea of bridging this resource building, engine building with this story exploration, interacting with boards and completing quests, I recommend this one fully. I think it's a really good one. And the combat is also really interesting and fun. So there's some great choices in this game. I really like it.
And where do you rank this one out of the other ones? Is this your favorite one, or is
This is I think it's up there. It's my favorite. That's not Sleeping Gods. So I think Sleeping Gods is like, as you compared Boonlake to Maracaibo, I think that Maracaibo is incredible. Like, it's one of the best games ever, and I think Boonlake is really good. But I think that Sleeping Gods is the best exploration game. But I don't think that Now or Never is near that heights of like, oh my gosh, best game ever. But it's still really good. It's better than like all those other small, not the other small games, but the other big box games that Red Raven Games has put out. But I think that Rome is also really good. Like, have you played that? It's a very small card game, not card game. Yes, card game, pattern building game. It's like pattern.
I played the old version of it, so it was actually a remake, wasn't it? Of
okay,
a game called Mykarinos. Yeah, I played the original.
There we go.
And that's a really good game, yeah.
Yeah, it is really good. So I thought that was really good for like a small box game. So not really sure how I would compare those two because they're very different experiences. But I think that this game is really good. I think give it a try if you'd like this world, this theme. So good stuff. I really like this game. Excellent. So that is Now or Never, a wonderful storytelling experience. Dan, what is your last game from the game we've been playing?
Okay, yes. So the final game is something a bit different. This is a small box filler card game called Subastral. So Subastral is by Renegade Games, by Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle. And these recently came to my attention through another game called Stella, which I absolutely loved, another two-player card game. This one has some kind of shared vibe to it. It feels like it's made from the same designers, even though there is a lot of differences. This one, to be different than Stella. Stella was a two-player game. This one is, I think it's 2 to 5. And it's a very simple set collection style game with a wonderful scoring mechanism that I think is great. So at face value, pretty simple. You're just collecting sets of these different types of cards. The bigger you set, the more points you get. However, you can collect additional sets, but they have to start from the same point as you collected the first set from. So you can't just randomly collect sets and hope it works out. You have to be quite meticulous of how you collect them. And on top of that, you actually score for your 2 biggest columns of cards, depending on how far along they were on the line you collected them. So if you want to kind of collect duplicates of the ones furthest along on your line, because you multiply it by that figure. So say it was the 5th one along and I had 3 cards of it, that'd be 15 points because it's 3 times 5. So I think that's such a great system. And the way you actually acquire the cards themselves is interesting because you play them on this communal row of cards, matching the number to number. So you put the 3 on the 3 spot. Then any cards to the left of that 3 spot, so the 2 and 1, you can take those cards into your hand to be used in the future. But the ones to the right of it go into your scoring area. So it's a balancing of the two. So you need to make sure you have a constant flow of cards into your hands, so you have the flexibility to do what you want, but you always have that urge to take them as scoring because they can potentially score you big points. And that is basically all this game consists of: taking cards into your hand or in front of you and trying to build those sets. But there's something about this game that is just magic. I don't know what it is. It is just, it strikes that wonderful balance of being thinky, but still really breezy and fun. So games like, well, all the great filler games for me fit that niche, and this one is right up there with those. Initially, I was kind of thinking this can't be as good as Stella because Stella's brilliant. And when I first played it, I thought, yeah, I probably still just narrowly prefer Stella, but now I'm not so sure. I think I might just prefer this one because it's just a bit more approachable and it just feels a bit more breezy and a bit more fun. But they're both fantastic games, but this one is just, oh, it's wonderful. It feels like a real classic filler, but still feels fresh and one that I highly recommend.
Wow, sounds amazing. Is this one plays 2 players as well?
Yeah, it does, and I think a lot of people say it plays best at 2. I've generally played it at 3, and that's kind of been my area I've played it on, and I think it works great at 3 as well. So yeah, I think it scales generally really well.
So, seeing as there's a lot of comparisons to Stella, is this one that you're going to keep over it?
Oh, I'll keep them both. They're definitely different enough to have them
Okay.
both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to explain because although they're not technically the same, you can just see that you can almost feel like it's got their brand of gameplay on it. You know, like with a Steffenfeld game, you can tell that it's a
Yeah.
Steffenfeld game, even though they're wildly different. It kind of feels like that, if that makes sense.
That's really cool that this creator has their own unique style. I really like that because they're bringing something interesting and clearly that's satisfying into the hobby space. So that's super, super
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely. I said in my review that these games kind of feel tailor made for me. I think they're so well done, so well done.
That's awesome. So that is Subastral, amazing filler game. Another wonderful gem discovered by Dan here. All right. This other game that I have to talk about today is also a literal filler game. And this is a game that I am so dang impressed with. This came out in like 2005, 2007, something like that. So it's pretty old and it's from Game Right. So this is mass market. But I could not believe it when I found it and my friend that showed it to me, he even thought that I was joking with him that I thought it was so good. But no, it is that good. This is a game called Ka-Ching. Have you ever heard of this game? Just before we start.
No, I don't think I have. I'm going to see if I can find the cover, see if it rings any bells.
So this is Ka-Ching. So Ka-Ching here, it's got the same artist who does Loot by Game Right. So the same, it's from that same like line of small box filler games, but it's a two-player only game of stocks. And the core system, I got taught in less than 30 seconds how to play this game. Point of the game, get the most money. On your turn, you either will take a card from this row of all these different columns of cards, or you are going to sell two cards in your hand. And when you sell two cards, you are going to multiply their values together. And that's it. That's what you do on your turn. You either take one of these cards that's revealed, kind of Seven Wonders style, where you can only take the ones on the front and you're revealing more below, or you sell two of the cards in your hand. Game is over when three of these columns are gone, and you have to take one of these actions on your turn. You buy a card or you sell two cards. And that's it. That is the whole game. But this game is so satisfying, so interesting, and so much fun. All of the information is present at the start, but the pacing is dictated by the players, and that makes for a really interesting experience. So on your turn, you have a lot of choices. Do I go for some minimal value so that I have access to bigger cards later, or so that I can take a string of turns where I can just continuously buy? But you can't just continuously buy because you got to play your cards because you're like, okay, I have to make sure that I actually have time to play these cards because I have a finite amount of time to play them. And then you're like, oh man, do I use my really big card now with this smaller number? But oh, there's that five up there that I can really try to reach for and try to appropriately plan and time out and take for myself. There's so many good choices here every single turn, but they're quick and satisfying and fun. And I love that the tension's on the players to kind of take the pass turns. It reminds me a lot of Seven Wonders Duel, actually, where you have an idea of the cards you're looking for, but there's no convolution, there's no clutter. It's all so clean with I know exactly how much this is worth. I know exactly how much value it has for me, but that could change based on my decisions and when I play my other cards. Oh, it's so good. I couldn't believe it. And that core system is extremely gratifying of selling things to get cards, to get money. And it's so good because when you do that, you open up actions, but you're also giving out those future potential plays. I cannot recommend this game enough. I had to go onto eBay to find a copy though, because it's gone. You cannot buy this game. You can buy used copies for like $5. Like that's awesome. But I wanted a new copy of this so I could sleeve it and make sure that it was like pristine because it deserves to be played. The only criticism of this game is it's two players, which sucks because I want to play with everybody. But I understand why it's two players, and that two players really makes it sing because it takes less than 10 minutes to play. It is extremely approachable. You learned how to play the game already in less than 30 seconds. I'm so dang impressed with this game. It's incredible. I really think this game is that good. It's like right from first play, it's a 9 for me. And when I get my copy and play it, like I can see me playing this game all the time. It's so good. I'm so dang impressed. That's Ka-Ching. Whoa.
Well, Mackenzie, you've sold it to me. I'm going to go and find a copy of this today, and
Go get it before everybody finds out about it. You need to buy this game quickly. Go
I just see this. It looks like it's been re-implemented by a game called Trader. I don't know if it's exactly the same or not.
So
Um,
I think that is available only in the UK. But yes, it has been re-implemented. So I'll take a look at the page. It has like three versions. This is I think the funniest looking version, which is great. But there are definitely versions of this game. One is Combat, which is just like these little tokens, and then the last one is yes, Trader. Um, but there are different versions of the game. So it's a 2001 game. 2001. What a clean, fresh design. When I saw this, I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone stole from this game. Like this game is like pure, distilled, clean fun. I couldn't believe it. This is amazing. Go find a copy, please.
I absolutely will do. This sounds right up my alley. So yeah, thanks for that. I will take a look.
Incredible, incredible game. Ka-Ching. Go play it. So, oh, I'm so hyped. This game's so good. I could talk about it for hours, even though it's only like got like 10 minutes worth of content. But that ensure the gameplay is so good, and just the decision tree from the start of the game is so wonderful. Oh my gosh, I love that game. So that's Ka-Ching. Go get yourself a copy. Whew. Oh,
Sounds great.
I'm all spicy right now. It's a little hot down here. Oh, okay. So that brings us to our next section, our crowdfunding picks. Now, Dan, you have a crowdfunding pick in particular you want to talk about, kind of?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, a loose one. I've not backed anything on Kickstarter. I've not partnered with my money, but there is a game that has taken my attention or caught my attention that I'll probably be looking at picking up retail when it comes out, because I don't think there's any tremendous incentive to pick it up on Kickstarter, particularly while
Okay.
it's by Queen Games, who seem to add on a bit of a premium. But yeah, this is a game called Old London Bridge. I think it's a pretty, medium light Euro style game. But one of the things that caught my attention was the designer, or one of the co-designers, Leo Colavini, who I tend to enjoy the stuff he puts out. Makes very clean designs. And one key mechanism in this game that I think will suit me quite a lot. So basically, I think you're drafting these different actions from these different represented by these different buildings, and you're putting them on this bridge that you can see here. But when you take these actions, each of these different buildings has a unique number on them, and they need to kind of depreciate as the game goes on. So you can't. You play a 45, then you can play a 41, and you can play a 36, and keep going down and down and down. But if you can't kind of go down and have to go back up, you have to replace one of your existing buildings. So I quite like that. I love the idea of building restrictions in the game, and it almost kind of feels like something like Ohanami, when you are squeezed as the game goes on, and kind of filter down into what you can do. So interested to see how that works in practice. I don't know too much about the other stuff. It looks like there's climbing tracks and all that kind of Euro goodness, but that key system to me just looks interesting enough to grab my attention. So I will probably pick this one up at retail when it comes out.
I really like it. I like the gimmick of the slots. It reminds me a lot of like just that satisfying feeling of something like Space Base, where you're just putting in these little things and it feels good to manipulate your tiny little tokens or tiles. I like that. It's cool. I hope it's good. And it looks like if you missed out on some of Queen's other hits like Coco Pelli, you can grab that too here, which is great. So that might be an opportunity to get some of those Kickstarter goodies that were available, or the expansion content. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, wait and see really, but just kind of thought I'd share some brief thoughts on it.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing. Good pick. All right. So my game that I want to talk about is actually an expansion for a game that we already have, and but it's on a Kickstarter for not that game. So the Kickstarter itself is for Reckland Run, which is in the solo series by Renegade Games, and this is a game where you play as like post-apocalyptic Bag of Max style. You have this. Car that you are using, running through the desert and fighting off all of these people that are trying to take your things. Reckland Run did not look that impressive to me. It was a dice placement, dice mitigation style game, and the reviews and the different videos that I'd seen of the gameplay did not pull me in whatsoever. However, if you notice in that little corner here, it also says also featuring Warp's Edge Anomaly. That's what I'm here for. So Warp's Edge is a wonderful little solo game where you are going to be taking this large row of ships, taking them out to eventually reach this giant mothership with your own little starfighter. And you do so with a bag building system. So you're pulling tokens out, using them, allocating them, and buying more special powers and abilities, and then using those to defeat these enemies. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy Warp's Edge. But this Kickstarter here offers a new expansion, which is great. So let's scroll down to that. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Warp's Edge Anomaly. This is going to give us some new things, new ships, new skill cards, which is great. New motherboard ships. And everything in this game is modular. So I can pair one ship with one boss with new enemies and that's excellent. So this is just more content for a game that I already enjoy, more options, more gameplay. And if you do the Kickstarter, you can also get access to these really nice plastic chips. So the tokens in this game are what you're constantly pulling, but it's got an upgrade that's similar to something like Quacks of Quedlinburg, where the chips are just these nice plastic, and oh, it feels great. And that's something that you really want, especially if it's a game that you're coming back to a lot, because otherwise those chips may deteriorate over time. But also, it's just really satisfying. It's the same reason that we use like coin capsules and things like that, not just for protection, but also just because that tactile feel is so good. So get a little bit of both of those, and now I don't have to worry about our sets not matching, because that would be really unfortunate if we got the expansion and didn't have those upgraded tokens and couldn't cross them over. But I think that this is a no-brainer if you enjoy Warp's Edge. I think this is the best in the solo series so far. Really underwhelmed with the first one, Proving Grounds. I think that game is not good at all. And Scott Alm's games are very hit or miss for me. So I was very much looking at Recklin Run. I was like, I don't know if I'm down to try this one. Based on the gameplay that I'm seeing and based on the reviews, like the reviews are pretty critical on this, which I thought was really helpful. So I'm glad that the reviewers actually looked at the positives and negatives of these. And but I know that Warp's Edge is good. One of my favorite solo games from 2020 or 2019. I don't remember which year, but it's great. It's really good, solo only, but this is a fantastic experience. So that's my crowdfunding pick: is Warp's Edge Anomaly. So that's that. Have you tried Warp's Edge? Is this something you're interested in?
No, I didn't know anything about this game, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, completely bypassed me. And I'm very much like you, though. I didn't know it was a Scott Alms game, and he's not really been a hit for me personally, to be honest. I've not really resonated with any of his games.
Gotcha. All right, so that brings us to our next section. So we are not doing any news segments today, nothing really fresh or super interesting to talk about that hasn't already been talked to death. So we're just going to move straight into card and component appreciation. So Dan, you've got a very interesting thing here that's recently been available. So very excited to hear about it. Tell us, what's your card or component appreciation today?
Yeah, so this is actually one of those times where a particular component, I think, completely well, I'm not a big fan of the game, but I love the components. So, but this is the for the very recent game called The Adventures of Robin Hood by, I think it's Michael Menzel did everything in this game, and he is probably one of the best board game artists out there. I think that's generally quite well kind of it's quite common information that a lot of people like his art style, and I personally think his art style is perfect for board games. So this is the actual board itself for The Adventures of Robin Hood. So first off, artwork itself, this is probably one of the most stunning boards I've ever seen. Absolutely, the level of like realism and just texture, and oh, it looks so good on the table. I love the look of this game. But the thing different about it, which, as I mentioned earlier, I always love when people try new things. And this one has a kind of a dual layered board, and one of the layers on this board has these little windows on, which you can kind of like flick over, almost like an advent calendar, and that's going to kind of change the appearance of the board. So where there would be a bit of grass before, maybe there's someone stood there now you want to talk to, or maybe there's a trapdoor somewhere, or maybe there's a boat somewhere that you flip over and you can travel from one place to another. So this idea of making these constantly dynamic boards where, depending on the mission or scenario you're on, the board state is going to be different and you're still playing from the same board. So complete kind of takes all that modularity out of things. You don't have to change this and change that and change that. It's all there in one place, ready to be manipulated based on the scenario you're on. And that could even change throughout the game. So, maybe at certain points in the game, you might say, flip this tile over, and now there's somebody new there who wasn't there before. So it just creates this whole new window of opportunity for this mechanism to be explored. And I've never seen it done before. And I think it's just a really, again, another ambitious idea that I think paid off. I mean, the gameplay isn't for me, but if you're into that kind of family story-driven game, I think it does pay off. So yeah, love the board for this one. Probably one of my favorite boards ever. Incredible.
It looks great. It really reminds me of you said it, the Advent Calendar. And I've really only seen this explored in games like Rise of Queensdale, but it's even there, it's completely different, where you're replacing tiles on a board. And so it's not really about discovering the things underneath, but I think it's a really great system, really cool. And I'm excited to see what other games start to employ something like this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it does. Yeah, it does take off. I'm not sure if it will, but I don't know. At least someone tried it.
All right, so my card and component appreciation is for a really interesting game. This is for Jab. So Jab is a real-time boxing game, and this is just a really interesting concept right off the bat. And I've been really interested in trying real-time games recently, especially with the success of Bullet Heart. I think that game is absolutely incredible, and so this gave me an opportunity to say, "Ooh, okay, let's try this out." I'm excited. My friend Dan had a copy of this, other Dan, but he had a copy of this and he showed me it, and it's really interesting. So the game itself is really neat. You're going to be moving your cards in your hand. One is your right hand, one's your left hand, and you're placing them on your opponent's character card. Now, this character card, it's important that you can it's important that you're placing them on there, and you have to be able to visibly see where you're placing these cards, because the symbols as well as the words on the cards really matters. So the area where you're placing them has to be large. It has to be the sections. But your boxings, they have to make sure it's thematic, and you have to make sure that the characters are representing this thematically. So your characters in this game are made up of cards, and they become the piles you're playing on. And just take this in. It is the goofiest thing. Those of you watching, enjoy. These are the character cards in Jab. Oh my gosh. Look at these cards. This poor man's neck. Look at this. So you've got the two characters, one at the top, one at the bottom here. They are ripped as all get out. Some of the most jacked men I've ever seen. But oh my gosh, they did these men dirty. So you're gonna have this really disassociated, dislocated person that you're playing cards on, and it just looks really funny. And I really got to share this with you. So this is my card component appreciation. I understand why they did this. I understand because you have to have these large areas, you got to have these piles. But as you play, you're gonna kind of like move them apart a little bit so that there's clear, distinct areas. So your dude is just the super wide boy the whole time. Looking like Kylo Ren. I'm telling you, it's so funny. You just it cracks me up. So I had to share this with you. I think it's hilarious, and I don't know, maybe we'll get expansion content in the future that gives us some more interesting character models. But I think
Yeah,
it's
when I saw you put this on the little sheet we had, I thought I don't know what you're going to say, if it was going to be serious or not. So I thought I'd be polite and be quiet. But I'm glad that you were taking the mick out of it.
oh my gosh, it's so absurd but so funny. So I had to share this. I think it's hilarious. It does facilitate gameplay, like it does. It's helpful, but I just think it's hilariously funny, and just like it's so bad it's good. I think it's so bad it's good. So I love it. So these
Yeah,
are the these are the character cards in Jab. All right,
yeah,
that's our card and
amazing.
component appreciation. That moves us to this or that. This is our section where we look at audience questions in regards to a topic that we were interested in. So, Dan, what was our topic from last week?
So yeah, the last question we asked was how you store your board games. So very simple question: do you prefer to store them vertically or horizontally? And it was a really close vote by throughout the whole survey. I think there's only about 5% in the end. So I think vertically just won out. I think it was like 55% to 45%, which is I thought it was nice and tight. So yeah, that was it really. Very simple one.
Excellent. And then one more time, can you reiterate, where do you stand on this line?
Yeah, you probably see behind me. Most of my games are stored vertically. I like the look of them stored vertically. Again, like the library books in the library. I like that visual. But if the game is too cumbersome, I do put them horizontally. But generally, I prefer vertically.
That makes
How
sense.
about yourself?
I do a mix of both. I actually have a box throne system that we store most of our games on, and those are all
Yeah,
horizontal, which is super nice. But then we also have calyxes and other shelves that we use, and some of those games in there are also vertical. So it's a mix. It depends on the game. Some games you want to keep them horizontal, otherwise the storage system inside is abysmal. It'll fall everywhere and it's terrible. But other games, who cares? Like you can store those, it's fine. Like no big deal. Like a lot of our campaign like storybook games are all vertical, like detective and time
oh yeah,
stories, all those modules. Like who cares? It's literally just like books and big stacks of cards that are already organized well, so there's no issues there. So I think it really is dependent on the game. But as you can see here, the audience was pretty split on it, about a 10% give, 45 to 55. And then we have some comments here: vertical preferred, but some stored horizontally as well. Do both depending on the box size and shelf space, which is where I pretty much fall in. And then we got our boy Tim here. It looks better vertically, but inserts that keep everything in place horizontal it is. So echoing our opinions here. And then Hannah over here is killing me. We're all animals, Hannah. So it cracks me up. So really like this. That's this or that. Store games, horizontal or vertical. And that brings us to our topic for this week. And this is a little bit different. This is not necessarily about where we're putting our games, but this is about the theming of games. And this is a very highly contested category, I think. This has been talked about for a long time, and it's gone both ways in popular media, which I think is really interesting. Dan, what's our topic this week?
So we're going to ask, well, thematically, which you generally prefer. Of course, there are exceptions, but very old trope question between, in geek culture, sci-fi or fantasy. So, do you prefer spaceships and ray guns or bow and arrows and horses? I suppose.
Perfect. And where do you fall on this line? If you were to just say gut right now, what would you say?
Oh, no hesitation at all. I love fantasy. I've never been into sci-fi. Never got into
Mm,
anything sci-fi in my life. I don't know what it is. That part of my brain just doesn't is not interested by anything sci-fi. Never really into Star Wars, Star Trek. Always loved Lord of the Rings. Always loved Game of Thrones. I love Stormlight Archive. All these fancy stuff. I think is I love it. I love it.
I think I'm definitely the same way with you. I really like the idea of being a person and traveling. And that's kind of what fantasy gives me. Whereas in sci fi, you're getting into a vehicle or you're having to explore this really vast openness. Where in fantasy, everything seems a bit more grounded, but also a
Yes.
little bit more, I, I guess, a little bit more tangible. You can touch it, you can
Yeah.
feel it. This is something that I could really relate to, as opposed to this wide expanse that is space with a lot of travel. And I think it's the idea of just being in a vehicle a long time. I think I don't like that, and I feel like
Yeah.
that's what space would lend to. Like I'd be like, all right, let's go back in the ship. Okay, fine. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that's like super. Clearly, that must be like the biggest thing. Like, oh no, he has to get in his ship. But I don't know. Maybe that's where I'm coming from. So
Maybe.
that might be
Maybe.
where I fall. It's interesting. I never thought about it that way before. Hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, even like generic fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of it out there. Stuff that's you've seen it 1,000 times. Standard bog standard elves, your dwarves with the big beards and stuff. It's just all been done again and again and again. But I still prefer that to even IP sci-fi. I prefer generic fantasy. Just the way I am.
Gotcha. And I think there's a lot of cool things that you can do with both of them. So I think sci-fi has a lot of neat stuff. You say, okay, this planet has these people, and this is how they've developed based on their society and just the way maybe the atmosphere is built, or maybe the compounds they're created from. And I think that's really interesting. Fantasy also has this stuff here, but I think I'm going to lean into that. It's more of this grounded world because we're thinking about, okay, how would they result if this form of magic infused? And you have a lot of flexibility and freedom with how it would work.
Yeah.
So my brother here is in the chat. He says unsubscribe. He's very heavy into sci-fi with the hashtags any fantasy world can be in sci-fi. Just go to the fantasy planet. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There's probably
Yeah.
fantasy
True.
planets. I don't know if you've seen any episodes of Rick and Morty, but there's like a whole dimension where it's like all fantasy based and science doesn't work there for some reason.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen a lot of it, and it is good actually. To be fair.
So you got some good points there, Jordan. I like it. So, but I think both of us definitely are on the fantasy side. If you're watching this now, you can give a comment, tell us your thoughts, or in the future, you can tell us on. We'll have it a corporate cardboard poll that you can vote on. So excited to hear your responses for this or that fantasy or sci-fi. He says science is definitely not grounded, right? I guess grounded is definitely probably the wrong word then. So maybe tangible is what I'm thinking of, or I feel like I could put myself in the shoes of someone in a fantasy world. I think that's more of what I'm trying to say. Whereas with science, that it reminds me of something that I probably could put myself in, but I don't really want to.
Mm.
I I think the vehicle thing is big. Like I really do think the vehicle thing is big. I hate driving and I hate all of this stuff. I hate
Yeah.
being in
Same.
vehicles. And so the idea of having to do that is killing me. And then we got another comment. Do the British do sarcasm? Who knows? Dan, do you do
Yeah.
sarcasm?
Yeah. Yeah. We do.
Excellent. Okay. So that is our this or that section. Fantasy or sci-fi. Curious to hear what your thoughts on this are as well. This brings us to our next section, mechanism appreciation. And we talked earlier about cards and components that we really enjoy from games. This is where we talk about the gameplay that makes us really fall in love with the game. So Dan, what do you have for your first mechanism? I guess our mechanism for today.
Yeah, so first of all, my mechanism is from the game Last Will, which is an older Vladimir Suki game. This one is a game with a really cool theme where you're trying to, well, you start with a whole bunch of money that you've inherited, and you're trying to blow it all as quick as you can to inherit more, basically. But the one particular mechanism that I really enjoy is the property system. So one of the best ways to get rid of money is to invest massively into an expensive mansion or something, to basically buy it expensive and sell it cheap to try and lose as much as you can. But I love the way that if you don't choose to pay for upkeep on these mansions, the longer you leave it, the more it depreciates in value. So I love that. You can just leave it to go to ruin, and the more people you kind of move in there, it can get even more ruined. It's just a really cool, just a cool thematic mechanism. And there's even like a worker placement spot where you can manipulate the market. So this particular type of house was expensive and now it's cheap. So again, you want to make sure that you're buying it high, selling it low, which is obviously very counterproductive. And that idea of just the time ticking by, and this mansion that was worth loads is just slowly getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But you still have to sell it, which means you're going to get some money back, which is not ideal. But that yeah that net loss is just a really cool thing to work out. And yeah, I just love it. Just thematic little tie there, and it works well for the game.
Gotcha. Excellent. I think the theming on this is so great. And we've even seen this in multiple games, which I think is really fun. And it's just one that people can gravitate towards. And it's something that you can really be like, hey, let's do this. I'm so down.
Yeah, a lot
Super
of fun.
fits. Super awesome. All right. My mechanism appreciation is actually a game that a viewer of the show showed me, and it was awesome. This is my friend Ashley. She came down from Denver and showed us this game called Ave Roma. So Ave Roma it was actually a Kickstarter game, and it's a Euro game that has a very unique worker placement system where you have workers of different strengths. You've got ones, twos, threes, fours, and fives, and whenever you go to a place, you're going to get an action based on what you put there. Well, obviously, that makes sense, right? So you go to these places and you'll get these actions. But the big thing here is when you recall workers at the end of every round, you are actually going to recall them in a very interesting way where all of the workers are actually all the same color. So something like Hollowtown, where it's just like this population of workers that are just there. But in here, when you pull back workers, you pick an area on the board where workers have gathered and you take all the workers back. And I think that's such a unique system, and I think it's done extremely well. So Ave Roma here, you have these. Let me find a picture of the workers. But when you decide to poll, you have to decide what group you're going to pick. And so you can pick a group that has just a bunch of really high numbers. So you're able to take stronger actions in different areas. Or if you have at the end of this polling action, if you have the lowest amount of workers, you get to go first in the next round. And that's huge. So you have this tension of, oh my gosh, do I pick up this group that has, got a couple of fives and I'm going last for sure, but I'm going to take some strong actions? Or do I really want to make sure I'm taking these good actions quickly? Or sorry, these weaker actions, but quickly. And I think that's a really good system. There's also a lot of markets in this game with these different cards that are going to be out and that you can choose from. And based on the number you pick, that determines which of the cards that you can take as well. So there's a bunch of things to think about when you're taking back these workers, but I think it's done in a really clean way where you're not just taking them one at a time, you take a whole group at once. And I think that's done really well. So I think this is a really strong mechanism in this game with the shared worker pool. Have you seen this in games before with this recalling system of workers that all are the same?
No, not in the recalling system. No, I quite like. I said the communal taking back, but I do always love it when games balance that strong actions slower, fast
Mhm.
action or weaker actions quicker. There's loads of games do it, and loads of games do it well. And this sounds like another good example of that being used well.
Yep. I think they're also just really cute. I really like the columns. And one little touch is on one side of these columns, they have just Arabic numerals here. And then on the other side, they have Roman numerals, just in case you can't read them. So you can flip them over if you want. I just thought that was really cute. And sometimes you'll accidentally knock them over and you might have a mixed match. And you're like, oh, this is so weird when everything doesn't match perfectly. So cracks me up. There's some good stuff here, though. But Ave Roma, a really great shared worker pool mechanism. And
Cool.
this brings us to our random games section. Any guesses, thoughts, opinions? What do you think it is? In the comments below, tell us, what do you think it is? What are we talking about today?
Ooh, I don't know. What are we going? Let's go for something. Let's say some kind of war game. There we go. A war game.
A war game. That's a pretty big category. I'm going to
Yeah,
say
exactly.
it is I think it's a game in the top 100.
Ooh.
If I win, it's going to be great.
Yeah, true.
Come on. It is not in the top 100. Go figure. This is
Oh,
Tattletale, the card game from 1999, about as old as Ka-Ching. This one here, it looks like it is not very highly rated. Based on the best-selling book, The Conversation Piece. Guess how your family, friends, and colleagues have responded to a wide range of questions. Ages 8 and up includes 240 full-color cards, a special die, a score pad, and a rulebook. All right. From US Game Systems, Tattletale, the card game. So we don't have much to go on aside from this picture here. Let's see what we can parse from this. Print and play. Not sure if it's a print and play. I think that you have to find this. You gotta pay a full price. Got to pay retail for this one. I don't think we're gonna get you a print and play version. I've got a page of rules. That's kind of nice. A score pad, name, colors. Honestly, this could be the frame for a lot of different games. What do you think? What do you think the rules are for this?
I couldn't hazard to guess. No, no idea.
So there's a random die with a question mark, different colored decks of Tattletales. I assume that this is going to be some form of party game. Maybe the colors have to do with something that you have to tell about yourself. There's no files, there's no expansions, there's no versions. Oh, there's one version, the English edition. I'm a sucker for these kind of games. I've been eyeing the restaurant conversation game in Barnes and Noble. This will do for now. And then 2. So it's a restaurant conversation game. Interesting. So I assume it's maybe
Yeah,
like Never Have I Ever or something like that, where you have to tell
yeah, that's
about
what
what
I'm
you're
thinking.
doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I imagine so.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can find a copy of this online. Tattletale card game. Any ideas? What do you think? Predictions on how much this would be if you bought this right now?
I'll be very surprised if you can find it.
Found it.
Oh, oh,
Oh,
okay.
there's apparently a couples edition of the game as well.
Okay.
I think it's a trivia game. That's what it looks like. Or I don't think this is the same game though. So
Maybe
there's
you
a
have to.
copy on eBay, but I don't think this is the same game. So it's called Tattletale Trivia. So maybe this is like the advanced version, since that's the card game. This is the trivia version. So maybe that one we just looked at was like a 2.0. Who
Maybe.
knows?
Maybe you have to pretend to know the answer to a question or something. I don't know.
Oh, I kind of like that. Does he know how she
No.
really feels about his family? What always makes her blush? What extras he likes on his pizza? How he feels about kissing in public? These are serious questions. These like some of these. I could see this actually being an extremely good tool to talk about to know where you stand on certain subjects. How do you feel about PDA, Dan?
Oh, there you go. This
Did I,
is
did I blindside you with this question?
no, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm easy. I'm pretty chilled out. It doesn't bother me.
Okay. Okay.
But this is like based on like a. I don't know if you had it in America, but in the UK we had a game show I think it was like the 80s and 70s based on this called Mr. and Mrs.
Okay.
And they would do these kind of things like they both get asked the same question, and if they matched, they'd get you know points, but if they didn't match, they'd have like a divorce or something.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
No, just they always
Oh
fell
my
out.
gosh.
They always fell out because they'd always think they would know the answer, but they never did. Yeah.
Interesting. This is really funny. My wife and I, we got married about 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we're coming up on our second anniversary, which is awesome. And one of the things that they did for her, I don't know if it's called a wedding shower, bachelorette party, something like that. They had me answer like a list of questions as to what I would think on specific topics, like who does this in the house, who does that in the
Yeah.
house. And it was really cool because she was able to get them all like right in a row. It was really neat. I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, she knows me and I know her. This is great. So it was really cool. So I thought that was fun. I really like that. So I like stuff like that. I think that it's really interesting to get to know people like this. And I think if there's a cool way to gamify that or just have a good time with it, I think that's really cool. So just something to facilitate conversation is good. So
Yeah.
that is Tattletale, the board game, which I think that's a cool one. Cool concept. That's good stuff.
2 out of 10 though. 2 out of 10 average, not good.
That's true. To be fair, 1 rating. And
Well,
it's a 2. So that
it's a
person's
strong one.
voice really matters. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll go one day and just find games that have no ratings and be the 1 or 2 sound voices on said games. We could totally make it up, not even actually have done these things. So that is our random board game, Tattletale, the card game. Now we go to why is this in your collection? You must defend your choices on these specific games, and you have to explain why they're here. Why do you own these? So, Dan, you go first. What game would you like to challenge me with?
Not necessarily a challenge, but one that
Oh,
I've
okay.
been on the fence with actually picking up myself because it's quite affordable. And I think it's going to be play a certain way, and I don't know if it does, so I'm going to ask you. So, excuse me. This is a game called Conspiracy Abyss. I think it's called. Or it's basically called a conspiracy in the Abyss universe. I don't know what the actual wording is, but it's a well, I suppose it's almost a sister game to the Abyss game by Bruno Cathala. But how does this game play?
Okay, so Conspiracy is a very small card game where the whole premise is you're trying to make a pyramid of cards in front of you. You're going to be scoring based on those cards, and you're kind of creating these sections, and you want same colors to match. It's just like in Abyss, you're trying to get your highest, you're trying to get a variety of colors, and you want at least one card in each color because you're going to score for your highest of each color you have. So if I have one single yellow card that's a one, I'm going to get 1 point for it. But if I have like 18 blue cards and my highest in those 18 blue cards is a four, I'm getting 4 points for all of those blues. But that being said, you're also going to score for your largest area of cards. So that's why it's actually good to get the same colored cards. So you've got some good choices when it comes to drafting. The big thing that it takes from the original Abyss, though, is you're going to be taking cards and putting them into your pyramid, but you're doing so through a like a risk. I don't know how to describe this. You're deciding how many cards you want to look at, but every card you don't take is going to go face up and be options for the other player. So just
Yeah.
like in the locations in the base game of Abyss, this is permeates every single action in this game though. So if I decide to, you can either take from a face up pool of cards or you can draw from the top of the deck. And when you take from the top of the deck, you pick how many you want to look at. You can look at two, you can look at three, you can look at just one and take it. So it's up to you how you want to approach this. And I really like that choice. You may be digging for a specific card that you need because when you are actually playing this game, you have to play it in the correct order on your pyramid. You always start from the top and go down. And you've got this reverse pyramid. So you start with a bunch of cards on top. So as you play, it's going to matter even more where you're placing these cards. So during the first part of the game, you may have more options because you're able to chain these different cards as they appear. But you might get to specific points where you're like, oh, I really need this color. And that gives a lot more decision space to your opponents as well. So I like the balance that this game offers with those choices. And it's in a great small package. So it kind of distills that selection mechanism, the original Abyss, and I think it does it in an interesting way. So it's a pretty. I really like this game. I think it's really fun. Not one that I end up pulling out a lot. It is a little bit of a table hog. And we talked about that earlier with that not being really fair criticism. But I don't know why this one doesn't come out very much because it is pretty fun. Interesting. I don't
Okay.
know. I think
Yeah.
maybe with the amount of choices you have, I don't think the tension is as intense. Maybe that's what's preventing me from pulling it out as often. I think that's probably it. I think that's it. I think that you have so much freedom in your choices that I don't think the tension is as ramped up as I would like in something as punchy in a small filler game like this. So I
Okay.
think that's probably the biggest thing that's preventing me from pulling it out as much as other games.
No worries. And you will build your own pyramid, yeah?
Yes. So you'll have this
Right.
area in the middle that's like a public area that you're going to be taking cards from, and then you have the pyramid in front of you.
Okay. And what's the best player count?
Good question. I don't know. I've played it with two, and it's been great. I've played it with all the way up to four, and it's been good. I think this plays pretty well at all player counts.
Okay.
That being said, you could have that issue where if you're sitting next to the person that always digs into the deck for a lot of cards, that could be pretty great for you. So I
Right.
could see that being an issue. So I guess it really just depends on the people you play with as opposed to the player count itself, because it's all about that risk, right? If I decide to do something risky, the player to my left is really getting the best benefit.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm not quite sure if I'm sold on it or not. I just again, I love the setting of Abyss. It's a beautiful
Hmm.
game. Um, but yeah, I don't know. This one just looked interesting to me because I know Luke from the Broken Meeple really goes on about it again and again, and he really likes it. And I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a go if I can find it for an affordable price. But yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So that's Conspiracy, the Abyss universe. Now, here I want to ask about a game in particular, and this is a reimplementation of an older game called Honshu. So I want to know about Hokkaido. So tell me, why is this in your collection? It's about the same rating for you that it is for me when it comes to conspiracy. So it's a light filler game, I assume, but I want to know more about it. Tell me about Hokkaido. I'm not sure whether I'm looking for a recommendation or just want you to defend. This is kind of just, I'm curious. I'm curious about this game. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this one, I'm not sold on it, to be honest. So it's not my
Okay.
game again. It's but I think it's fine. So this uses the same kind of overlapping mechanism that was used in games like Sprawlopolis, Agropolis, Circle of the Wagons. Games I think we both enjoy. This one I think doesn't use it quite to the standard those do. One thing I did quite like about it is that as the game developed, whenever you get these mountain squares, like one of the terrain types is a mountain, and they kind of divide your board in two, and that's going to be one of the scoring mechanisms. So I think all the houses on one side is compared against all the houses from the other side. And I think your lowest of the two scores. So it's got that kind of
Mm,
balancing thing there. But that was quite a nice restriction. And then the rest of it is all just your bog standard stuff as you'd probably played 1,000 times. Create the biggest river, create the biggest field, that kind of stuff. So there's nothing really unique about it or particularly interesting apart from that mountain thing. And I think the rest of it, I think there was a draft as well. I think I've only played this once, so it's not
okay.
fresh in my mind. But I remember feeling a bit underwhelmed by it because there are so many other games that do this kind of thing better, I think. But one that I think might have been more kind of better in its time, maybe when it was the first of its type out. But as time goes on, I think it's just lost its luster, I think. And I wouldn't really recommend it if I'm completely honest.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the fair review here. So this here in so I played the original Honshu, which is essentially this exact same game. You've got that scoring criteria, you've got the boards that you're creating, and you are drafting the cards based on their values on the bottom here. I think the bigger the number, the worse the card is, but the higher you get to go in actually picking the cards. And so everybody reveals the card at the same time, and whoever is won that draft gets to actually pick the card first, or something like that. Something like that happens. But I think you nailed it really well. There's a lot of games that use this mechanism, and I think I played this right after I had started playing games like Sprawlopolis, Agropolis, and all that, Circle of the Wagons, and I was like, this feels like that, but just not as good. Like not as clean, not as straightforward. A little bit more fiddly. You're putting these pieces on and then
Yeah.
using them for other activations and effects and
Yeah.
scoring. But it does have some cool ideas, and I think that the mountain mechanism here is actually really interesting. I like that
Yeah.
you're creating this split. I think that's really cool that you have the choice on where you're putting this. And I think that's really fascinating. I think that's a really good decision here on Hokkaido, and I think that's a great evolution of this system that we saw in Honshu initially. So I do like this system. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think that it's a good evolution for this game.
Yeah, I completely agree. 'Cause that mountain thing is probably the thing that I like the most about it. But as you said, some of the putting tokens on stuff just didn't feel quite smooth to me. Yeah, I yeah, not well for its time. I think there's way other better options out there.
Gotcha. All right. So that is the why is this in your collection, specifically Hokkaido and conspiracy. Next up, we go to our A to Z section. This is where we talk about a small game and a heavy game, both in the letter of the week. And this letter is for R. Dan, what do you got for me for your lighter game this week?
Okay, so my lighter game is quite a famous game called The Resistance, particularly the Avalon version. This was actually, I think well, one of the games where maybe my first year in the hobby just blew my mind. I think, God, this is what board games can do. I thought, this is amazing. I'd never want to play another game again. And I still really adore this game. I think it's brilliant. My favorite social deduction game by far. So essentially, this is a game where um, two, as with most social deduction games, there's two teams. This example being, the Knights of the Round Table, and then the minions of Mordred, which are the bad guys. And basically, you're going to play out over, I think it's 5 different quests, or if it gets to that point. And basically, someone is going to be picking a team of who they're going to take with them on a mission. And when they're on that mission, the people on that mission can either choose to put a positive, like a pass or success token, into the pile, which gets shuffled up, or they can put a negative one in there if they are a bad guy. And you can try and kind of pull the wool over people's eyes by maybe playing a positive one if you are the bad guy, just to gain people's trust and that kind of stuff. But what I think differentiates this from a lot of the other social deduction games for me was how all the different roles worked with each other. So I love the fact that there was always this Merlin character who knew what everybody was, but if the bad guys worked out who Merlin was, then they get one shot, and if they choose correctly, then the bad guys still win. That's been recycled in games such as Deception, because it works that well. But there's additional wrinkles and layers on this game where maybe one character, or maybe there's like a fake Merlin, and then maybe there's another character who knows who the fake Merlin and Merlin are, but don't know which one's which. And all that, I just think, once the bigger picture builds up and everybody has a fragment of information, it just creates such a great experience. And I've played this anytime still. I think I'm probably out of my gaming group, I like this way more than everybody else, which kind of prevents it getting to the table. But I still adore it, and it will probably never leave my collection because I think it's brilliant. That's the Resistance Avalon.
This is a good one. Resistance Avalon, I think, really pioneered these unique roles. And as you've mentioned, they've been repeated multiple times in other games. Things like Werewolf, One Night, you see a lot of these effects that have been like, ooh, that's good. Let me steal that. And so I think that's great. I think that just speaks to the strength of this design because it's been robbed from and then improved and iterated on as well. So I think Resistance Avalon is a great choice.
Thank you.
Excellent.
What have you got?
So my small game is a game that I talk about a lot. I think this game is really, really good, but it's called Rumble in the Dungeon. This is a very small game of line and King of the Hill combat. So it's very, very cute in the way that it plays. On your turn, you have control of a million different characters here, but these characters there's two in particular that you're trying to keep alive. But when you go, you pick any character and you can either move it or attack with it. And when you do so, you're going to be taking out people. And so there's going to be this line of corpses that you're going to be collecting throughout the game. And your whole goal is to make sure your person is alive at the end. And I think this game is done so, so well. You have a simple decision on your turn, but you have that objective of protecting your specific people. And you do so in the form of these little tokens. And so you need to manipulate the board state, which is a randomized dungeon that you'll create at the beginning of the game, and determine how you're going to save your people by also putting other opponents' people in danger. You can feign that you are specific characters. You could do some risky plays and move your own character into danger just to kind of pretend that maybe that's not you. You don't really care about that person. And you have a lot of great choices here when it comes to moving, attacking, and planning for the future. I think that's really great. This game in particular plays over a couple of rounds, or you can play just a single one-shot event, but you're trying to keep your person alive because you're going to get extra points based on how long they live. And I think it's really well done. There's also little tiny expansions based on the version you get. This one in particular, the Rumble in the Dungeon, introduces a treasure chest, which offers a way that you can kind of break the normal rules of movement. Normally, if two characters in a room, they're stuck and they have to fight to the death, which is really cool. But the treasure allows you to grab it and leave if you're in a room with it. So it's really neat. You can break that rule. And if you're at the exit, which is this little green tile here, with that treasure token, anybody can move that character out, but whoever actually has that token with that character on it just wins the game flat out. So there's a lot of scary things that can happen, and I think it's so well done today. It cracks me up. So I think it's so well done. It's really good. So that's Rumble in the Dungeon. Have you seen this? Have you played any of its iterations?
No, I've not actually, but it does remind me of a game that I used to have in my collection called it was called 10 to Kill, or 10 Minutes to Kill, where people you'd have an objective and you kind of had to feign who you were and try to not, put that bit of poker face on when things get a bit hot under the collar. But I like that concept. I've never really found a game that does it quite to the standard I like or would hope it would get to, but maybe that's a one to look at.
Yeah, so that's Rumble in the Dungeon. Up next, Dan, your heavy game.
Cool. Yeah, so my more involved game is a game called Rococo. Particularly, well, so not particularly. The only version I played is the deluxe version, the newest version, because this game was like gold dust to get hold of for quite a few years. But yeah, this is a game by Matthias Kramer, who's one of my favorite designers, actually. This is a game all about kind of getting fabric and building this really fancy costumes and dresses for the aristocracy to go to a ball, really, and you're using all these nobles to control these majorities in these different ballrooms to get victory points. But the thing I really like about this game is the hand management, because every kind of action you take is accompanied with a card that you must play, and all these different cards have different kind of gradings on them. So you've got like your novices, you've got your apprentices, you've got your masters, which is these gold cards here, which will allow you to take different actions. So to take a particular action on the board, you might need a master, but then maybe the masters don't come with such a great bonus from the card. So matching that too is quite a cool system. And as the game goes on, funneling it down to how am I going to play this most, to be as efficient as possible and not waste what I can. And it's just a really, it's a midweight Euro, but one that works well for what it is. That hand management in particular is what I like. Amazing production, probably overproduced from the Eagle Griffin version, but I think it adds to the pomp and circumstance of the game, which fits the theme. So I quite like the way it all comes together, and it's a really solid design that I think stands up well. Simple area control and majority, some other ways and interesting ways to get points, but the game itself is so well rounded, and I enjoy it a lot. That is Rococo. Ark
Wow,
Nova
this
Deluxe.
game is lovely. I don't know
Yeah,
why, but I'm getting like Lisboa vibes with just the way the art is presented. It's just really,
yeah,
really well done. Oh my gosh.
yeah. It's in that. In one of those big Lisboa boxes. So it was same publisher, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's a really lavish production, like really exquisite.
I'm glad to hear that the hand management is as good as you say it is, because that's one of my favorite things in game. I like the idea of using cards to take actions. It's super fun to me. So big fan, big fan.
Yeah.
Excellent. So one that you would recommend to for me to give a try?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd enjoy it. Obviously, it's quite pricey, so I I kind of feel a bit hesitant to always recommend it when games cost so much. But for me personally, it works a lot, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, why not? I suppose I would if I'm honest. I like it, so maybe you will too.
Excellent. All right, so that is Rococo Deluxe, Dan's heavy R game. My next game here is a game that has had multiple expansions, but the core concept is so straightforward in the way it's done. This is the dice drafting game Role Player. So, Role Player takes the familiar trope of fantasy character creation and allows you to actually literally roll up your character. And I think this is done extremely well here in the form of dice drafting. You're going to be using dice to build up the attributes of your characters. Now, these attributes, you all have a specific target that you're going for based on the cards that you take. And then these cards are going to determine what values you want in each specific row. For example, this cleric here wants 14 to 15 strength, and they want 16 to 17 dexterity. So you're going to be trying to take dice that fit those specific values. But points come in a lot of different ways in this game. The first way you can get points is by meeting those attribute goals. You can also pick up your own scoring objectives, and that's my favorite part about this game, are these trait cards. So during the game, you can pick up traits, and they'll offer you little challenges and little bonuses that you can take. And I think that's just so awesome. I love the choose your own scoring in games. And I think this does it really well because it just offers you more paths. And if you get a bunch of traits and you're able to satisfy all of them with all these new restrictions you're putting on yourself, it is so satisfying. And I think it's done really well. And since you're dice drafting, you'll have a lot of choice with the dice you pick up. And there's a lot of modulation and dice mitigation through the use of your attribute actions, as well as other items that you can pick up in the future. So you really can tailor make your strategy based on these cards you're taking, but it's always that push and pull of, ooh, this risk, but this reward. And I think it's done so, so well here. So a lot of things to love here. And the expansions in particular, I think, are necessary for this game. They add a lot of really great decision points into the course of the game. First off, with the monsters and minions, that offers the ability to actually take your character when you're done and go hunt something. And that is so awesome because you'll be actually fighting a character, and based on how well you do on the character, you get additional points. And if you don't kill that character at the end, you just straight up lose because you didn't prepare for this final boss fight. That's where you're going. So I think that's really neat that there's this looming threat that you can prepare for, and based on how you're taking out its minions, you can get some additional dice at the end by preparing for these bonuses. So neat, so interesting. And the last thing I want to mention is the expansion for the Fiends and Familiars. They offer these new Fiend cards, which offer these negative debuffs onto the highest dice in each drafting round. And I think that's so neat because now to take the best dice, you also have to have some negatives. So there's actual penalties that occur from this. And I love that system of I'm picking my own restrictions, I'm picking my own scoring criteria, and then I'm getting a lot of ways to mitigate and change these results. And a lot of times the play is simultaneous when everybody's taking their dice because they're able to do their own little mini board action after they've taken that main dice drafting action. This is such a clean system. The pacing is great, and the evolution of the mechanisms and mechanics through the expansions is wonderful. Love Role Player. Excellent game. Have you played this?
No, I haven't played this one, and I think we spoke about on a previous episode. This came
Mhm.
out roughly the same time as Sagrada came out, and I went for Sagrada because I thought I'm more likely to get that to the table with non-gamers, my
Yeah.
family and partner, etc. So I went for that one, and then after I was done with Sagrada, I went straight on to what I thought was like more advanced dice drafters like Coimbra,
Yeah.
Trismegistus, all that kind of stuff. So this kind of bypassed me just for that default reason. But kind of you explaining it now made me think it's maybe a bit heavier than I thought it was. How does this compare with something like Coimbra? Is it much lighter or is it comparable?
So, uh, I think that it's I think that it's mm, I think it's I think it's comparable with Coimbra. I would say that it is. I think that there are more options in role player because you're having more of the drafting rounds. In Coimbra, it's the gathering the resources, the end game scoring, moving on the board, managing your tracks. You've got these specific criteria going for. I think that the dice drafting is more interesting in Coimbra, but I think that the gameplay of role player is more compelling, and I think the pace of role player is a bit better. So that's kind of where I'm going. You're drafting more dice in role player. You are taking more actions. You're getting more cards, but you don't have as I don't think the dice drafting itself is the most incredibly thoughtful and evocative thing in the world. I think in
Right.
Coimbra,
Okay.
there's so many things on that little die, and you're like, oh my gosh, this die is everything. I need this die. But in role player, it's like I need that 6, so I'm going to take the 6, and it's not like this crushing decision. There's no
Right.
cost to the die, and as opposed to, well, I guess there is now, which is really cool. So I think that's great. So you do have some of that with the Fiend expansion. So I think this is really done, really well done. The fact that you are drafting as many dice as you are, but the pace is still extremely fresh, and the flow is really well done. I think it's really good.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I think the only reason I asked that was because I have so many dice drafters in my
Yeah.
collection that, do I have room for another one? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And so, yeah, and I tend to lean towards the heavier versions of them because they kind of stand up for more plays for me. But yeah, I mean, this one's definitely stood the test of time, and maybe even held up better than Sagrada has, because I don't hear many people talking about Sagrada anymore, when a few years ago that's what they would really talk about, and this one kind of took the back seat, and it seems to almost reversed. So maybe the expansions and the like sister games adventures has kept this one alive and kept it thriving, really. So it's clearly a good game because it's definitely stood the test of time now.
I think this would be right up your alley. It's that fantasy theme, and I think the gameplay is quick, fun, and the market is really what makes it the most interesting because you're getting powers, abilities, and scoring criteria as you play. And I think that's just a really healthy way to, inject fun and interesting decisions into a game. So I really like it. This is good stuff.
Cool. Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll happily try it.
So that is my heavy game for A to Z. That is role player. And that brings us to is this the end of our show? This is the end of our show. That's it.
That's the
So
end.
we are all finished with Corporate Cardboard today. Thank you so much for being here in the live chat. And thank you, Dan, for joining us this morning. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, always a pleasure. Hopefully we'll do it. Well, it won't be such a long gap next time. But we live across the globe from each other. It's not always as easy as if we lived in the same country. But
This
hey,
is so
we did it.
true.
We did it in the
Before
end.
we wrap up, Dan, are there any games that you're excited to play soon? Anything that's coming out?
Yeah. So I still need to get Hadrian's Wall learnt and played. So that's got to still be right at the top of my list. I need to make an effort to get that one played sooner rather than later. But I have played quite a few new games this month, so I've been trying to get back and play some older favorites to revisit those. But yeah, new games need to prioritize Hadrian's Wall.
Gotcha. Oh, I really like Hadrian's Wall. I think it's absolutely wonderful. So great game there. Next one here for me is Ark Nova. I'm playing that today. Hopefully,
Yeah.
like, geez, that better get played today. I'm so excited. Oh, I'm going to learn the rules in the next hour here, and then hopefully get it played in 2 hours. So excited. I cannot wait. Ark Nova is going to be great. I also played a game, the tutorial mission of Familiar Tales yesterday, and that was really good. I'm pretty impressed with that game overall. So I'm excited to play more Familiar Tales. And then the last thing that's on its way, we have the Isle of Cats expansion coming in, and then the what is it? Ascension, the miniatures deck building tactical game. So that is
Okay.
also on its way. So we have a couple of really exciting things that I can't wait for. Let's go. Oh, so
There
excited.
we go.
I can't
I'm
wait for
sure.
Ark Nova. You made me so hyped for it. It looks so good.
I hope you enjoy it. I really do. Let me know. Let me know how you enjoy it.
I will. All right. Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you, everyone here in the comments, for being here. Thank you for joining us this morning. Tim, Jordan, thank you for being here this morning. And for all of you watching later, please make sure that you engage in this discussion. I'm excited to hear what you think on this or that. What are your favorite A to Z games? Thank you for everything. And thank you so much for joining us today. Dan, any other closing words?
No, just thanks as always. And be sure to leave a comment and we'll get back to you. So see you all next time.
Awesome. SideGame Strong, y'all.
Bye bye.